welcome to Testify. We now take a look at the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah was known as the weeping prophet. He was an Israelite priest who lived and worked in Jerusalem during the final decades of the kingdom of southern Judah. He was called as a prophet to warn Israel of the severe consequences of breaking their covenant with God through idolatry and injustice. He predicted that the empire of Babylon would come to destroy Jerusalem and carry them into exile. And sadly, his words became reality. He lived through the siege and destruction of the city and witnessed the exile take place. Jeremiah chapter 1-25. Accusations and warnings of judgment. God calls Jeremiah to be a prophet to Israel and the nations, and his words would uproot and tear down, and also plant and build up. Jeremiah was to expose Israel and warn them of God's coming judgment, but he was to also give a message of hope for the future. Chapter 1-24 give us a number of poems written by Jeremiah before the exile. Israel has broken their covenant with God and violated all the terms of the agreement in a number of ways. They've adopted the worship of all kinds of Canaanite gods and built idol shrines all over the land. Jeremiah calls idolatry the term adultery, and words such as prostitution, promiscuity, and unfaithfulness to describe how Israel has given their allegiance to other gods. Jeremiah accuses Israel's corrupt leaders, priests, kings, and prophets who have abandoned the Torah and the covenant, leading to social injustice. The most vulnerable in their communities, the widows, orphans, and immigrants, are being taken advantage of in clear violation of the laws of the Torah, and Israel's leaders don't even care. In chapter 7, we read of Jeremiah's temple sermon. Israelites are coming to worship their God in the Jerusalem temple as if everything is fine. Outside the temple, however, they are worshiping other gods, even adopting the horrifying Canaanite practice of child sacrifice. Jeremiah makes this very bold announcement that the God of Israel is coming in judgment to destroy his own temple, and punish Israel by sending an enemy from the north. This is an army that God would allow to conquer Jerusalem, known as the Great Empire of Babylon. In chapter 25, Israel has still not turned back to their God, so in the first year of Babylon's new king, Nebuchadnezzar, God tells Jeremiah to announce that their armies were coming to conquer and take Israel into exile for 70 years. He compares Babylon to a cup of wine, filled with God's righteous anger, at all Israel's injustice and idolatry, and he says that he will make Israel and the surrounding nations drink from that cup. Jeremiah chapter 26-45. Stories of disaster and a message of hope. These chapters open up with Jeremiah calling the people to repent. He warned continuously despite the constant rejection of Israel's leaders. These chapters concludes with Jerusalem's siege and eventual destruction, as well as stories of how Jeremiah was persecuted and later kidnapped, and taken against his will to Egypt, with a group of Israelite rebels. Jeremiah brings a message of hope for the future. He repeats Moses' prediction that Israel would break the covenant with their God and go into exile. But Moses also promised that God would not abandon his people, he would renew his covenant with them, and transform their hearts. God would heal their rebellious hearts, so that they are able to truly love and follow him. In that day, Israel will return to their land, the Messiah from the line of David will come, and all nations will recognize the true God. Jeremiah chapter 46-52. Judgment for Babylon and exile. The next chapters speak about how God will use Babylon to judge the nations around Israel, such as Egypt, Philistia, Moab, Edom, Ammon, Damascus, and Hazor. The longest poem at the end of the book are about God's coming judgment on Babylon itself. Although God used this nation to execute his justice, he does not endorse their violence and idolatry. Babylon, too, is judged under the standard of God's justice, so Jeremiah denounces its pride and injustice as well. Babylon's pride thinking they are larger than life, but God will give the Babylonians over to their own destruction. The book concludes with an insert from 2 Kings 25, and tells the story of Babylon's final attack on Jerusalem. The soldiers destroyed the city walls, burned the temple, and took many of the people into exile. The story shows how Jeremiah's warnings of judgment, from chapters 1-24 were in fact fulfilled, and Jeremiah was vindicated as a true prophet. The conclusion tells a short story about the captive Israelite king, Jehoiakim, from the line of David. After some decades of imprisonment, the king of Babylon releases him, shows him favor, and invites him to eat at the royal table for the rest of his life. This brings a small glimmer of hope that recalls Jeremiah's prophecies of hope. God has not abandoned his people, or the promise of a future king from David's line. And that's the book of Jeremiah. That concludes the book of Jeremiah. Join us for more.